Okay, welcome. Can you please introduce yourself and tell us and the listeners of the podcast who you are and what you do?
So I'm Deb Dana, and let me think, how would I introduce myself? I think what I'd like to be known for is translating polyvagal theory into clinical application and user-friendly language. So maybe I'll go with that. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, but I no longer see individual clients because now I do the work of writing and teaching and inviting others into befriending their nervous systems.
Yes, and you just wrote this book as well.
The Glimmers Journal
Yes.
is the most recent book, and actually, it's fun. I was just in the recording studio yesterday, recording the audio for the Glimmers Journal, so it's right here fresh in my mind right now, and it was a lovely experience to go through it in that way, to read it and think, oh, this will pull someone and this will pull somebody else. So yeah, the Glimmers Journal was a labor of love. I've never done a journal before, so it was something very different for me to write. And I hope it lands for people out there in the world as an invitation to find the tiny moments of joy in every day.
And it is just, I mean, I told you this before we recorded, but it's just physically beautiful. Like I
Mm,
feel like just looking at it right now is a glimmer.
yeah. Yeah, they did
Mhm.
a beautiful job creating it. It's always interesting. You have an idea in your head, and you have something that you want to get out into the world, and you put it on paper, and then you hand it over to this amazing team of people who turn it into this beautiful journal. So yeah, well, let's give a shout out to the wonderful people at Norton for being able to do that. I think I wrote in the acknowledgments that the people at Norton take words and turn them into beautiful books. So yeah.
Yeah, they did a great job. Um, so can you, for those listeners who don't know what polyvagal theory is, can you give a brief explanation of what polyvagal theory is?
Yeah. So polyvagal theory was created by Stephen Porges, dear friend and colleague, decades ago now. And over the past years, it has moved out of the scientific world into the world of the clinical world first, and now I think into the world of who I call curious humans, because what polyvagal theory does is explains the human autonomic nervous system. And the autonomic nervous system is where everything begins for us, right? Every lived experience begins in your nervous system. And then that energy gets translated, it gets communicated to your brain, and your brain translates it into a story. So that's how our body brain work together in this beautiful, beautiful way. So Steve, uses, I think, what I would say is three organizing principles that are important to understand: neuroception, hierarchy, co-regulation. And we can look very briefly at the three of them so people can feel how this comes to life. If we start with co-regulation, that's what you and I are doing right now, right?
Mhm.
Our nervous systems are having a conversation, and the co-regulation is helping each other feel safe enough to connect and communicate and be present together, right? Co-regulation happens between nervous systems, between humans, and is something that we have to have in order first to survive when we come into the world or born, but then to thrive over the course of our lifetime. And for many, many of us, people have been dangerous, right?
Mhm.
People have been not safe to co-regulate with, right? That's what brings many people to therapy, many people to come from a place of suffering because people aren't safe, right? And the nervous system is longing to connect with others in a safe way that can feel nourishing. So that's co-regulation, and something we're working with all the time, both in therapy and also just in our daily lives. We're looking to find people and figure out what feels safe to my nervous system. Right. So that can take us to neuroception, which is Steve's word that describes how the nervous system makes those judgments. Right. How does the nervous system decide safe or unsafe? And it does that through this process called neuroception. Neuroception uses three pathways. It's listening inside your body all the time. So, if you take a moment and just listen inside, you get cues of, oh, this, my stomach's feeling good, or my breath is easy, or my heart rate's really elevated and my digestion is off. They're cues of safety or danger all the time. Nervous system is listening to that. Then it listens to the environment. Right. So it's listening into the world around us to say what feels safe, what feels unsafe. Sounds, smells, sights, all of these things are nervous system information. And it takes it and decides approach or not approach, stay or go. And then the third thing is what Steve named hierarchy. And hierarchy is the three states of our nervous system that we move through in a specific order, right? And that, I think, is so lovely to understand. Ventral being the state of regulation and safety, and that's where glimmers live, right? Glimmers live in a state of regulation, right? So we'll come back to that in a minute, but ventral is I think the place our nervous system longs to be and knows how to get to. Right. It's built into our human wiring that we know how to get to regulation, given the right cues and the opportunity the nervous system will take us there. That's the state of safety and connection. Then we have two states of survival. The first is sympathetic, fight and flight. You're smiling. You probably know that state well. I know that state well.
Yeah. I spend a lot
Anxiety.
of time there.
Yeah, right. Anxiety, anger, right? Having to accommodate others, having to figure out, how do I manage things because the world's crazy, right? From a place of fear, right? So sympathetic acts from a neuroception of danger, and it's a place of fear, right? And those twin pathways of either anxiety or anger, of flight or fight, that live there. The other survival state is dorsal collapse, shutdown, disconnect. So it's the sort of the opposite of sympathetic. Sympathetic, you're flooded with energy. It's disorganized, chaotic. It's all over the place. Dorsal, all the energy drains from your body. And so you don't have any energy to do anything. It's sort of a despairing, hopeless, give up state. Right. And again, this is a nervous system experience. Brain then makes up stories, but in its origination, it's your nervous system. Right. So you spend a lot of time sympathetic. I spend a lot of time dorsal. Right. And this is true for all of us. We have one of those survival states that our nervous system seems to prefer over the other. We don't know why, but it happens. So, for your listeners, they might think, do I spend more time in that anxious, aroused, activated place, or do I spend more time in that, down, disconnected, collapsed place? Right. And again, if we can do that without judgment, because we're not choosing it, the nervous system is simply taking us where it thinks we will be safest. Right. So those are the three organizing principles, so that we can get an overview of polyvagal theory. And, if we sort of just turn toward our nervous system for a moment and have some gratitude for it, because it keeps us going. Right. It keeps us going, whether we're regulated or dysregulated. It's helping us move through the world so that we can make it to the next moment.
And
Mm.
when it comes to Fawn, where would you say that Fawn lies on the map?
It's interesting because Fawn is a in some ways a submit collapse response. So a dorsal experience. The word that we often use for more of the active experience of accommodating or pleasing is the word appeasement. Right. And so it has a different flavor to it, doesn't it? Appeasement is this active, I'm going to do whatever I need to do to make sure I'm not seen as a threat to the other person, which in the world of people who live in dangerous experiences, that appeasement is important. For people who grow up in family systems where they take on the role of appeasing, it's an active sort of drivenness. There's an energy behind it. So that's more of the sympathetic experience. The collapse, the fawn, the submit is more of the dorsal, I give up,
Mm,
right? But the active people pleasing is more sympathetically driven.
yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
Thank you for explaining that difference too. And so when it comes to glimmers, you said glimmers live in ventral vagal. So how did you come up with this incredible concept? Was it birthed from your knowledge of polyvagal? And can you tell me more about that?
Sure. Yeah. Yes, it came from my diving into polyvagal theory, and my work was with complex trauma survivors. And so when people come to therapy, we therapists focus on what's dysregulating them, right? What's bringing them suffering. We commonly call those triggers to dysregulation, right? And yet, the nervous system, in order to fully help us thrive, needs us to both resolve, reduce, work with the things that dysregulate, and also actively experience moments of regulation. So in my work with clients, I love to create maps. I love to create ways to track things. And so I had a map that mapped their triggers, and I knew, oh, I also have to map the moments of okayness. And so the next step was, what do I call those? Right? I know we need to identify them. What do we call them? And again, I'm looking for a word that felt not too big, not too out of reach, not like, joy or happiness or this balance or calm, which is often what we think of when we think of ventral calm, but that's overwhelming for someone who's stuck in suffering. And so I was looking for a word and came up with glimmer because it felt tiny, but it's sparkly, and it would bring alive that sense of a tiny micro moment of feeling okay in the world, right? So I tried that out with my clients, and they loved it. So it became the triggers and glimmers map, and that's where it all started. I don't know, 12, 14 years ago, and then it's been fun to watch it leave the therapeutic realm to move outside that into the everyday language and everyday world. And I think that's probably something that brings great joy to me, is knowing that glimmers are now out there in the world.
Yeah, I feel like it's becoming more and more of a household word that people who are not in the therapeutic space are becoming familiar with, which is really special.
Yeah.
I actually did the a training with the Embody Lab where you spoke,
Mhm.
you led a few of the sessions. And
Yeah.
I remember when you were leading the practice for Glimmers, you said a moment of good enoughness.
Exactly.
And I
Yes.
remember that being really world shifting for me because
Yes.
I have a background in the Tantra space where it's all
Mm.
about find your pleasure, find your orgasm, your big, like you said, these big,
Yeah.
sometimes that you don't have capacity for
Yeah. Yeah.
expressions or feelings. And when you said good enough, I was
Yes.
like, oh,
Yes.
I have that.
Yes, you do.
Yeah.
Yes, and that's the experience that I had with my clients. They could say, "Oh, I had one of those moments." Yes, and we want to remember, as we're talking about glimmers, that glimmers in no way discount the suffering, right? They're not this toxic positivity that's going around in the world as well, where we just turn away from. What glimmers do is they build your capacity to turn toward your suffering differently, right? So they're actually, and I would explain that to my clients and say, we're going to spend some time really nourishing your capacity for safety and connection through glimmers, through tiny moments, so that we can have the ability to work with your trauma, to work with your suffering safely, right? So we want to make sure that people understand that this isn't a count your blessings and discount your challenges. This is the exquisite way the nervous system does both. It both holds the suffering and can notice the glimmers, right? It's pretty cool how our nervous system is built to do that, isn't it?
Yeah, side by side, like
Yeah,
parallel.
yeah,
I'm even thinking, because we were talking about this before we started recording, but the fires happening in
yeah,
LA.
yeah,
Um, can you give like a practical real life of example of someone who is maybe living through something like this, a real life
yeah,
tragedy or divorce or
yeah,
illness, and how can they integrate this in a way that doesn't feel like toxic
yeah,
positivity?
yeah, yeah. And when you're in the midst of an unfolding crisis, when you live in a world that's filled with cues of danger, um, we want to remember that glimmers are still there. The glimmers, and it may be, um, a bird singing, or the sound of a piece of music, or someone who just offers you a smile, right? They're tiny little moments that if you stop and just take it in for 3 seconds, your nervous system will register it and can feel it, right? So in the midst of, destruction, there may be a moment where, someone puts a hand on your back, or you catch the
Mm.
eye of someone, right? Or you see something that reminds you, oh, right, the world is filled with cues of danger, and there's a tiny sliver of something else here. Yeah. And I think, for people listening who are in these times of great struggle, um, the part of the work is to not search for glimmers. Don't make it a search you're going on, but just sort of set the intention to be open to seeing what might be there, right? When we actively search for, it takes on a very different flavor of experience. We don't want to be driven to find glimmers. That's a sympathetic, out of fear, I'm looking for glimmers.
Okay, it
Rather,
causes a stress.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
that makes sense.
We want to anchor in the knowing that glimmers are there, and they will appear, and just be open to seeing them. That's more of the experience when you're in these moments of crisis, of trauma. That's really what we want to be doing. And then when the world, becomes a little more balanced, a little safer, a little more connected, whatever it is for you, then you can begin to create a glimmer practice, right? And if you've created a glimmer practice, then they become easier to find, right? So what I
Mm.
love to have people do is create their practice, and then it just becomes woven into your day, because finding a glimmer is easy. You see a glimmer, and you take 2 or 3 seconds, and then you go on with your day. It's easy to weave in. Once you've created that practice, then when the dark times come, your system's already primed to be looking for those glimmers.
Mm. That makes sense. There was a time recently where I was walking through my living room and I have this leopard print, like fur coat, and it was draped over my couch. And I just stopped and looked at it, and something about it just felt so nice to look
Yep.
at. And then just went on with my day. But
Mhm.
I think it's interesting because people always come to me, and I don't know if people do this with you as well. They come and they say, like, what's a practice I can do for anxiety? What's a practice I can do for
Mm.
this? And what I like about Glimmers is it's just becomes habitual. It's not like I'm like okay, I'm gonna do my glimmer time. It's like I'm drinking my coffee in the morning and feeling the warmth as it hits my face and smelling it, or
Yeah.
feeling the sun on my face, or looking at the sun coming through the trees and just pausing. And it's
Yes.
so integratable that it's
Yes.
one of my favorite concepts
No, I
just in
love
the
that.
world of somatics.
I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah, it's easy to reach for and reachable, which is lovely. And so the and what you're talking about, I love your leopard print, and it was a moment you stopped and then you went on with your day, which is just what we want to do. It's marking the moment for just a few seconds and then going on, right? The what I discovered was people love to then share their glimmers. They love to reflect on their glimmers, remember their glimmers. Because when you were just talking about your leopard print, you probably could feel it come alive again. And
Hmm.
I joined you in that. I thought, oh, that is sweet, right? So you had it again. You shared it with me. I felt it. It's this lovely, again, reciprocity. It's that sort of co-regulation piece that can happen as well. So the Glimmers journal was born out of that experience of, oh, I'd like a way to gather my glimmers, is what I talk about. Can you gather your glimmers? And people do it in all sorts of ways. And I thought, ooh, they're sort of categories that seem, useful. And so then it just sort of took off from there and has become this really beautiful, beautiful journal that hopefully people are going to have the same experience that I had creating it.
Hmm. Yeah, it's beautiful. That actually leads me to a question that someone submitted on this element of the share.
Mm.
So, when it comes to differentiating, like let's say mindfulness versus this practice of glimmers, the
Mhm.
practice of noticing glimmers has this element of share. So, how does that differentiate it from mindfulness?
Yeah, and it's interesting because I mean, anytime we bring awareness to something, it is some sort of a mindfulness practice. Um, because my early work with clients was with people for whom these moments of feeling okay were fleeting, and inviting them into a mindfulness practice would be activating to their nervous system. It would be way too much. Mindful moments, perhaps we could dip a toe in. But again, I'm always looking for ways that we can engage the nervous system's capacity for regulation, but not overwhelm a person. So that's where the tiny drops, right? And perhaps the tiny drops add up to something, and we know they do. We know a glimmer comes in, it lands in your system, and then another comes in and they begin to accumulate. That's the joy of glimmers. It's not just a one and done. They accumulate and begin to give you more access to ventral. So as glimmers accumulate, you likely have more access to engage in mindfulness, right? That would be a outcome of it, not one that I was looking for. But anytime you have more capacity for regulation, you have capacity for mindfulness. The piece around sharing, that again, because we're following the principles of the nervous system always, the piece around sharing is the nervous system longs for co-regulation. And so
Mm.
anytime you can add in a sharing experience, the nervous system appreciates it, right? Actually, on both ends, both nervous systems appreciate it. I will say that, someone's glimmer might be another person's trigger, right? The glimmers aren't like, your leopard, you know, print coat on the couch was also a glimmer for me, but there may be many people listening for whom it's not a glimmer. It's a trigger instead, right? So when we share our glimmers, we share with the knowledge that I just want to share this was a sweet moment for me. And with the hope, the expectation, the wish that you have that experience too, and the understanding that you may not, but it's okay,
Hmm.
right? Because you can still respond back by being happy for me and my glimmer.
Mm.
Yeah. But anytime we can add in that piece, of connection, we want to do that because again, that adds weight to whatever we're doing on a nervous system level.
Hmm. Co-regulating and
Mhm.
sharing.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. That's
And
why we encourage people to create to find a glimmer buddy or create a glimmer group, right? At work, at home, in your neighborhood, in your family, to create some rituals around sharing glimmers, because that then brings that, experience of regulation and connection and co-regulation into the mix.
mm. And when it comes to the element of time, I know that you said it takes about 3 seconds. I've noticed for myself when I really love hiking and
Mm.
I'll go on hike with a friend, and if we're like tang, 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 the whole time, I can get through
Yep.
the whole hike and be like, I have no idea what I
Oops.
just saw. I
Yeah.
didn't resource at all with nature because I didn't take a moment. And I noticed that what I need to do is I was just walking in the morning with my friend and there was fog over this pond. And I was like, okay, we need to stop talking and I just need to take this in for a moment. So I'm
Yeah.
just curious, like, how important is this element of time in
Mm.
glimmers, and how does that vary person to person regarding their capacity to hold it
Yeah.
and just this idea of this
Mm.
resource of time?
I love thinking about you walking and talking. You were on a different kind of hike. You were on a co-regulating, sharing reciprocity hike, and not
Yes.
not the nature hike, right? Not the
Right.
Yeah, you weren't co-regulating with nature. It was with another human.
Yes.
It's different. It's lovely. It's
Hmm.
lovely. Yeah. So yeah, it's interesting because glimmers really do just take a few seconds, right? You can spend longer if you want, right? And in a different practice, you can turn a glimmer into a glow, right? You can hang on to a glimmer, you can let it build, you can bring it to life with, you can add, color and sound and touch and feel all of that. And it can fill you more. It can glow, right? Which is lovely and is a different practice, right? Takes more time, takes more intention, attention. Right. So again, if we come back to glimmers, I think have become so popular because they they can be done in a few seconds. They're very quick. They're gentle, but they're powerful. And we want to remember the power of a glimmer because the glimmers do begin to shape your system in a direction of connection, right? So glows are lovely, mindfulness practices, all these things are lovely and really hard for some of us to do,
Mhm.
right? Whether it's we have a very busy day or we have a very sensitive nervous system, doesn't matter. So we're looking for ways to invite in those micro moments that shape the system and do it in a way that feels gentle and I find a glimmer and then my brain and my body both appreciate it and I organically look for another one. That's been the experience when my clients would find their first glimmer. They would say, "Oh, I'm going to look for another," right? Yes, because it feels good. It's
Mhm.
easy to do, it feels good, and it's having a big benefit to your nervous system.
So it's really truly the noticing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they happen all the time. On that hike, you probably had a lot of glimmer moments,
Mm,
but you didn't notice them. So they didn't register in the way that they would have if you'd stopped and go, oh, look at that bird or that tree or that flower. Then they would have landed in your system differently.
mm,
Right. So it's the notice, the practice is see, stop, appreciate, see one, stop for just a few seconds and appreciate it and then go on. Right. Because when you do that, you're marking the moment and your body and your brain are taking it in differently.
mm. Okay. See, stop, appreciate.
Yeah.
Like stop, drop, roll, but
Yeah. Right.
stop,
Exactly.
appreciate.
Yeah.
One thing that a few people submitted, and I really resonate with this sentiment, is they said, when I notice glimmers, I notice I feel sad. Like I'm
No.
looking at a sunset and I
Mhm.
notice, oh, that's beautiful. And then this
Mhm.
sadness emerges. And
Mm.
so is that something that you've seen before? And if so, what are your thoughts
Yeah,
on it?
well, yes, and a couple of things come up. One is um, we can be in that place of safety and connection, of regulation, and experience sadness. We can still be having a sense of I'm okay, and there's a bittersweetness or a sadness that comes, right?
Mm,
So it's not necessarily that we've gone into anxiety, fear, or shutdown just because we feel sadness. So when I work with clients, that the question would be, so where did that sadness, where did it come from? Did it come from this sense of being in the beauty of a sunset? Or did it come from a sense of anxiety or fear or
mm,
anger or collapse, right? So that's the first thing we want to discern. So yes, when you know, are with a glimmer and you feel, you know, maybe the glimmer brought a moment of awe, and then you felt sadness, right? So then you're going to discern, let me be curious about this sadness, right? Is this sadness, am I still feeling safe, regulated, and connected and sad? In which case, that's great. That's fine,
mm.
right? If you're dysregulated around it, then we want to think about that differently.
And how would someone discern that in the moment?
So, probably the easiest way to discern is to think, you know, again, if we go back to neuroception, when we have a neuroception of safety, we feel um, you know, regulated enough, safe enough. We feel present enough, right? I'm okay. You know, it's that the land of okayness. I still have a foot in the land of okayness,
Mm,
right? If I've gone out of that place and I've moved into a survival response, then I'm no longer feeling okay. I'm feeling in danger. I'm feeling some form of either, you know, get me out of here, or now I'm angry, or that sort of hopeless despair, right? And so
mm,
the cue is to figure out for yourself what are the signs that you are in collapse, in fight, flight, or in the land of okayness, which is, you know, I call, you know, ventral's the land of okayness, sympathetic's the land of should, right?
mm.
There's a drivenness to it, the should, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I feel that urgency just as you say that.
There you go. And dorsal's the sort of the land of it's sort of nowhere land. You feel like you're nowhere, right? So
Mm,
if you feel that drivenness, if you find a glimmer and you appreciate it, and then you begin to feel drivenness around it, it's the glimmer's gone, and you're now moving into a survival response, right? And if that happens, then what I invite people to do is to just take a moment, turn toward that experience and say that there's something I need to know, right? So you could turn toward that drivenness and say, well, what do I need to know? Right?
mm,
Because there's a message there for you. There's always a message when we're having these experiences with our states, right?
mm,
And it may simply be that your system, you know, is worried that if you start enjoying the glimmers, you won't get anything done, or you'll forget about your to-do list or whatever it is, right? And so then, you know, you get that information, and I know it sounds crazy to be talking to your nervous system, but it's what we do, right? And then you can just reassure your nervous system, a glimmer's like 3 seconds. It's okay. I can
mm.
take 3 seconds out of this, and I can come back, right?
That's really interesting you say that actually, because like I said, I have this background in tantra work that was focused a
Mhm.
lot on into pleasure integration um and that was something that came up a lot for myself and other people I noticed was um this the openness to pleasure, the receptivity to towards pleasure that was
Mhm.
then coupled with this
Yeah.
we don't have time for this. This is
Right.
selfish.
Right.
Over couplings.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So again, you can just let your body systems know, your brain know that this is a few seconds, and it will resource me so that I can be more productive. I can do what I need to do today. Because that's what glimmers do. They
Mm.
nourish your nervous system in these tiny moments.
They build that capacity.
Yep. Yep. Yeah.
Um, from the Tantra space as well, one thing I mentioned this already, but there's a big focus on big moments.
Mm,
There's a lot of catharsis in the that space. And one thing I've come to realize since understanding the nervous system is that there's not always integration when there's catharsis. There's not always capacity to really
yeah.
hold catharsis.
Yeah.
So I really enjoy glimmers because they're little like Costco samples
Yeah.
um of peace or joy or whatever,
Yes.
these maybe bigger
Yeah.
emotions. So
Yeah.
I'm just curious if you can tell me more about why the nervous system benefits from a micro moment instead of
Yeah.
a catharsis.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting because catharsis and in the therapy world, in not recently, a while ago, we thought a cathartic experience was necessary to heal trauma. And then we began to understand that the cathartic experiences really dysregulated the nervous system. And as soon as you are in dysregulation, you cannot integrate what's happening, right?
Mm.
So we need enough regulation to then go to the traumatic moments that live in sympathetic and dorsal, but to go safely so that we can remember, reflect, restore, not relive. And catharsis is that reliving experience that is a dysregulated nervous system. So we want small moments of being with the suffering, the trauma, the dysregulation, small moments so that the nervous system has a chance to be with and regulate, be with and regulate. It's that dip in,
Mm.
integrate, dip in, integrate that helps resolve, digest whatever word you want to use, the traumatic, integrate the danger stories into a new cohesive story, a coherent life narrative, right? So it's the tiny moments that do the dip in and then pull out, dip in, pull out. So glimmers, because they're tiny moments and they come in all sorts of flavors, right? You were talking about flavors, and flavors is one of the
Mhm.
categories in the Glimmers journal because we all have our own flavors, right?
Mhm.
When I first thought about Glimmers, they were moments of happiness, and then clients would start giving me all these other words, and I went, oh, right, it can be any flavor that when you are feeling safe and regulated, right? It can be calm or peace or ease, but it can be joy or playful or excited or passion, any of those things,
Mm.
right? And again, to broaden the experience of ventral into all of those flavors is really helpful. We all have our favorites, right? We have
Mhm.
our favorite flavors that we find more often, or we name it that. And my recent favorites have been these tiny moments of joy, which I love. Just joy. And joy just fits. I think that's a lovely word that goes with glimmer. So, you know, those are mine at the moment, and who knows what they'll be 6 months from now. But yeah.
And when you started integrating this practice for yourself, what changes did you see in the way you related to the world or anything else?
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey because, whenever I create something, I want to try it on for size before I offer it to my clients or my colleagues, and then I have colleagues who, have consistently been my test pilots for all of these things. And, you would be surprised how many practices, worksheets, maps, things never made it past the test pilot stage, right? It's like, oh, that didn't work at all. So, I had a group of people who, were playing around with the triggers and glimmers map with me, which was lovely. An easy way to sort of help clients begin to dip into what glimmers even are. For myself, glimmers have really been a practice for a long time. And I did write in the acknowledgement section in the journal that I was writing this journal and finished it. I was writing it as my husband was dying. He'd been sick a long time, and I finished it after he had died. And it was for me this true experience of how glimmers can help you get through some really dark times, right?
Mm.
Because glimmers were sort of all I could find in over those many months, and that's all I needed. Which, as I get to reflect back now, I can say, oh yes, it was the tiny moments that for me, they were the unpredictable ones, right? We have predictable glimmers and unpredictable ones. For me, it was the unpredictable glimmers that would happen during a day that kept me going, right? So I think I'm a living example of how glimmers can help you make it through these dark times. So yeah.
Mm.
So for me, it's a it's truly it's a lived belief now, right? I've had the lived experience, and I think that's what I discover with people who begin to you know take on a glimmer practice, right? And I get emails often, which I love. People will send me oh, here was my glimmer experience, and this is what happened. And it's so lovely to see that there is great power in this tiny moment. And it
Mm.
is not just in that moment, it ripples out, right? It ripples out into the rest of my life. It ripples out into the world. So we become glimmers for others. We can be a glimmering presence in the world, right? I can, sometimes when I just smile at someone, I think, oh, that might have been a glimmer for them. Not what I meant, but it might have been a glimmer. How nice is that, right? Those are the things that kept me going in the the many months that Bob was in his dying process, was those tiny moments that just appeared and reminded me, oh, right, there is not just the suffering, but there is these tiny moments of okayness. Yeah. Yeah.
One question that someone submitted as well, which I think is perfect to integrate right now, is how to feel glimmers when you're in a really dark place,
Yeah. Yeah.
when it
It,
kind of feels like
Mhm.
there's maybe not a lot
Yeah.
there. Hmm.
It is hard. And I think, again, if we can build the glimmer practice when we are not in such a dark place, then I can feel a glimmer in my body. My brain often will recognize a glimmer, so it can come any way. Your brain might recognize, you might feel something in your body, right? But when you've had enough of those glimmer moments, then even in the dark times, something will come by and your body will send you the message, or your brain will say, stop for a moment. There's a glimmer, right? So, like many things, it's hard to create a glimmer practice when you are surrounded by the darkness. It's hard, and it's hard to do on your own. If people are really suffering and feeling, overwhelmed with cues of danger, my hope would be that maybe they have someone who they could talk with and begin to look for glimmers together. Because again, it's easier to do with when we're in those very dark places, right? And I guess the belief, and the belief that I hold, it's hard to hold a belief when you haven't experienced it, but the belief is there are glimmers waiting for
Mm.
you to notice. And again, if you don't put the pressure on yourself, but just hold some kind of a mantra around that, and everybody can write their own, right? That there is a glimmer somewhere in my world today, something like that. And then just let it be, right? And sometimes even just holding the mantra is enough to begin to see a bit differently, right? Because when we're in those dark places, we're in survival mode. And when we head to survival mode, we're this, our focus narrows and we are solely focused on making it through, right? And so it's hard to expand the perspective enough to say, oh, there might be a glimmer just outside my
Mm.
field of vision. So yeah, yeah.
I know one thing for me as well that I've noticed. I'm moving through a breakup right now, and people want to just talk about it. Like, talk, how you doing? Da, da, da. And it's like nice, And also, one thing that I've learned from this practice and then just somatics in general is the importance of pendulation, of not just staying, okay, great, I'm going through a breakup, I'm moving through this difficult phase in my life. I
Mhm.
don't want to just stay there like
Right.
all the time. My nervous system cannot handle that. It's going to buckle. And so
Mhm.
pendulating between talking about that and then talking about, oh my gosh, this morning was so nice. I was sitting out on my chair and noticing the sun on my face and then and so it's just such a important practice. I think even more so in those tough times, so you don't just go down the rabbit
Yeah.
hole.
And I love that pendulation, and then we have to reassure the people around us that I want to just talk for a moment about the sunshine and the morning and the goodness. Reassure them that doesn't mean that everything's fine or that I am, pushing all that aside, right? Because that's often what people around us think, right? But think that this allows me to be here as well, right? And I think once if we can actually tell that to people, we reassure their nervous systems, and then maybe they can join us in the morning sun and the coffee, and then we can go back there. But I like your pendulation experience, yeah. And glimmers are can be that beginning of not just being stuck in the darkness. Yeah.
It's like this weaving that happens.
Yeah.
So we're not just stuck in orienting towards pain, 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 suffering.
Right.
Okay, this sucks. But yeah,
Right.
it's beautiful.
Yeah.
One last thing is I noticed that you have a chapter on people and animals, and I
Yep.
really liked that you put that because whenever I do any kind of resourcing or glimmers work with people, they always talk about their pets.
Exactly.
And so I
Yes.
was just wondering if you can just speak on that, this
Sure.
special relationship of
Yeah.
animals and how they
Yeah.
can be glimmers.
Yeah, and that really came out of my early work with my clients. I practice in rural Maine, where many of my clients did not have people around them who felt safe, but boy, they all had pets. And thank God we had dogs, we had cats, we had horses, we had cows. It was wonderful to have these other, animal friends that we could feel connected and safe with. And so, they were often in the beginning their glimmers. My cat did this, my dog did this, my horse did that. It's so yes, because in the beginning, it often is our animal friends that are the connection, the mammalian connection that we are longing for, but haven't been able to find, right? And so bringing pets in and either you have pets yourself, but just being out there in the world and seeing the animals in our world can also be a glimmer, right? Just seeing, oh, there's a sheep in the field, or there's a person walking their dog, right? Or, there's a section on bees, bugs, birds, and things that fly too, because we love to follow things that fly, right? It's a glimmer moment. So absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. As we're talking to you, my dog is
I could see just the teeny
so
bit. Yeah.
she's like chopping wood on the couch right next to
Um,
me, and she's
love it.
consistently a glimmer for me as
Mhm.
well, where even if
Yeah.
I'm in like a session as a client, I'll look
Yeah.
over at her and just feel really resourced. So I loved that you added that
Yes.
in. And
Yes.
for the last moments of our chat, I'm just curious if you can talk about the layout of your this journal, and it's so thoughtfully curated and written and organized. And so I'm just
Thank you.
curious if you can kind of go through what someone can expect to experience
Yeah.
with the Glimmers journal.
Thank you. That's kind to hear. I put a lot of thought into how to organize their categories. There are, I think, 5 categories that people with prompts, right? And again, the prompts are sort of general. There's a little bit of the science of why, we're drawn to things that fly, and then there's some prompts to look for these different ways of seeing things fly. And then, at the end of every category, like there's people and pets, there's nature, there's art and science, right? There's flavors of glimmers, there's embodied glimmers. And then after each section, there's some blank pages where you can further explore your own experience of glimmers in that category. And and in the beginning of the book, I write that there's no one way to go through this journal, right? Because the nervous system needs choice, right? We know that. That's one of the C's. It needs context, choice, and connection. And so I'm giving you a little bit of context at the beginning of every section so that you have an understanding of why looking for glimmers in this category might be helpful. And then I'm inviting you into choice, that you might decide, okay, this week I'm going to work in the people and pets section, and you might spend a week in that section. Or you might decide, I'm going to wait till the end of my day and I'm going to see what glimmer I found and add it to my journal, right? You can skip around, you can go in order. There is no one way to do it. Your nervous system is going to invite you to do it. So I really wanted to be aware of that, and be careful about how I put them together so that people could jump around in any way they want. So there are those categories, but then there was this broader experience of glimmers that I really thought was important. And so, after the categories, there's glimmer environments, because I think when we figure out what our glimmer environments are, then we kind of return to them, we look for them, it gives us a better capacity to find glimmers. There's sharing glimmers, which we touched on. How do you create glimmer groups? What can you do to share your glimmers? And then there's glimmering. I love the word glimmering. How can you be a glimmering presence in the world? Because as crazy as it sounds, and I think sometimes I probably sound very, very naive or simplistic. However, glimmers change our nervous systems. These tiny moments begin to shape us towards more regulation. And when we are more regulated, we can then offer that to the people around us. We can be a glimmering present for people around us. And in some ways, this is the tiny movement towards changing the world, right?
Mm.
I hold on to that. That keeps me going during the dark days when people want to figure out how you change a system, right? Overwhelms me immediately. I don't know. And yet
Mhm.
I do know that I can work on my system. And glimmers are an easy, approachable, accessible way to work on my system. And as my system becomes more regulated, I then beam that out to the systems around me, and we will begin to ripple that out into the world.
Mm. That's beautiful. I love that. Oh, that is just I'm just taking that in actually. Um, to close off, I'm curious what some of your favorite glimmers are.
Oof. Well, it's interesting. I love the glimmers in nature. Those are probably my go-to. So, I'm lucky I live in places where if I look out my window, there's something green, there's something moving. So something coming out of the sky often, there's
Mhm.
snow and rain and clouds. And so probably nature is the place I go to first for glimmers. When I was writing my very first book, I was writing about resourcing and nourishing, and when I go outside in Maine and stand in my driveway and look up at the sky, it's filled with stars, and usually the Big Dipper is there. So that's a predictable glimmer for me. That's one of the predictable environments for me, is under the stars, and just looking up and feeling that majesty of, oh, right. And I can feel it now as I remember it, right? Which is the other lovely thing about glimmers. When you remember them, you could feel them again. So my hope is that as people fill out the journal, then they can go back and review, reflect their glimmers, and they'll feel them come alive again.
Mm.
What's a favorite glimmer for you?
Watching my dog nap is
Yeah.
so beautiful. She naps like it's a sport.
I
And
love it.
it just is so lovely to see her so relaxed.
I love it. Yep.
For me too, hiking,
Mhm.
specifically being near water in the
Yes.
sun is
Yes.
just the best. Watching the sun come through trees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hot drinks in my hands, like
I
smelling
love
the
it.
tea. Yeah.
Love it. It's
Hmm.
funny in the art and science category, I love reading scientific research. Um, not a glimmer, but more of a deep dive for me. But the thing that's a glimmer for me is when I figure out a piece of technology or a something that I haven't known how to do, and I figure it out. And my kids and my grandkids have hysterics around that. They think grandma is so funny, but for me, that's a glimmer. It's like, I did it, right? So, in the art and science category, that would be it for me.
Oh, interesting. Okay, yeah. So it can also be like a little accomplishment.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
And so where can people find you on social media and where can people find your book?
So come to my website, which is rhythmofregulation.com. And again, I'm gonna show my age here at the moment. I am on no social media at the moment. So you can't find me there. Although apparently I am out there in other ways. Other people put me out there. So, but come to the website, and we are just we're putting together a glimmers page where people can share their glimmers, where we want to create a global glimmer community. So come, and that'll be waiting in the next few weeks. We're just getting it set up, and the book is probably available for pre-order. It's not out until March, so it will be out in March. Norton is the publisher. So on the Norton website, always on Amazon, and probably on some of your local bookstores. I don't know yet where it'll be, but and I hope that when people have the Glimmer Journal and start using the Glimmer Journal, that people will send me emails and let me know what they find helpful, or what has happened for them as they begin to notice their glimmers. That's my hope.
Okay, beautiful. And is
Mhm.
there going to be an audiobook as well? I know you mentioned you were doing some
There
recording.
is. I just recorded the audio version, which was really fun to do. And when I went into it, I thought, well, there aren't that many words. I mean, I recorded one of my other books, which had lots and lots of words. So this, not a lot of words, but
Mm.
it was labor intensive, and it was lovely to go through and read the prompts and be with the prompts. And so, yes, that will be available when the book comes out, the audio version. And then you can get your own journal and, write down in your own journal. I take you through all the categories and the prompts. So, and that was a joy to do as well. Yeah.
That's so fun. Any last thoughts before closing out?
Oh, it's been lovely to talk with you. This is new and I haven't had a lot of chance to talk about the Glimmers journal. And again, I am so delighted that what began as a way for complex trauma survivor clients to begin to feel something outside of their trauma has now become something for everyday humans to also feel something ex- outside of the challenges that we all are facing in our days. So I love that, and thank you for this opportunity to talk. It's been
Yeah,
great.
thank you.
Mm.